Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Pokelore podcast. I'm your host, Professor Snorlax. You can call me Nick, and I'm joined, as always, by the one, the only,
Long boy, Benny boy.
Long Boy Benny Boy. That's right, it's Ben. And today, we have another fun topic for you guys to talk about. We're going to give you our thoughts on what makes something a good design in Pokemon. Whether it's just, physical design-wise or in terms of its flavor. So I got some thoughts. Ben's got some thoughts. I guess I'll go first if you don't mind, because I think you know what I'm going to say, because I say it on stream all the time.
Oh, boy.
I just like it when Pokemon get bigger. When they just become bigger versions of themselves, and I can make, like, a clear line from its baby version to itself. Like, Bulbasaur is a great example of this, right? He starts out as just a little dinosaur with a bulb on his back. Then he just gets some spots, gets a little bit bigger. The flower blooms till eventually he's a giant frog with like a tropical tree on his back. And then when he Mega Evolves or Gigantamaxes, the tree just gets even bigger. I think that's cool. That's like how an animal... I could buy it that an animal went through those stages.
A basic evolution looking type of thing.
Yeah, another really good one for that is the starters are usually pretty good with this, except for a few like glaring exceptions. The Typhlosion line, all the Gen 1 and 2 designs really.
I would say Gen 2 specifically does a great job of doing it.
Yeah, you're right, because I mean Charmeleon to Charizard is kind of like, all right, where do those
even Wartortle to Blastoise, it's like, all right.
True, but you're right. Those 3 Johto starter lines are perfect in terms of just like simple designs that just get gradually more complicated.
Yeah.
Because I feel like nowadays, and not even nowadays, it's always been like this. There are certain lines of Pokemon that start very complicated and then they just kind of go all over the place.
I think 2 and 4 does a really good job of doing it. Like those 2 do it the best. For the generations.
Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right about that. There are some starters that go completely out of left field, so I want to give you one that I think is an example of like a bad design. And this is just talking about the evolutionary line as a whole, not the Pokemon themselves. But going from Oshawott to Duat is great, and I love that Duat design. But then where does Samurott come from?
Oh, I can fight this a little bit. I think Samurott's a great design. I think Duat was a bad choice of direction.
Okay.
I think they could have made him more of like a bipedal, or I mean like a quadruped type of thing if that was their direction in the end. Or
turn into like fins or something.
Yeah, or they could have made Samurott more standing on his back legs.
Yeah.
Because he does hold a sword, but he's on all fours. Like it doesn't make much sense.
It's true, but it's just also that like. So Oshawott is this like cute little otter, and then Duat is a cute little otter, and then they just randomly decided that he was like a big seal now? Is that what he's supposed to be? Like, it was bizarre. I like the design of Samurott a lot. Like I think Samurott looks really cool. It's just going from Duat to Samurott.
It's a bizarre transformation.
Yeah.
They could have. I think they could have done a better job with Duat to just make that transition, though.
Right. I think you're right. I think most of when there's a problem in like a 3-stage evolution of Pokemon, usually the middle choice seems to be where they go wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any. I'll give you your point in just a second, but I just thought of something. I don't know if there's any like credence to this, but. Let's go back to Gen 1 designs for a second, and we know there's all kinds of weird stuff with the programming of those games that made all kinds of weird glitches. Doesn't Venonat look like it should turn into Butterfree?
I think that was like I don't know if it was just like fan theory or something like that, but I think there was something where there was some mix-up, and Venonat was supposed to turn into Butterfree in the first place. Because Venomoth looks like it's shaped like Metapod.
That's true. And like I could see Caterpie going either way. And either way, a moth don't moths have to go through like a cocoon phase too?
Yeah.
I could even see Weedle turning into, well, maybe not Weedle turning into Venomoth, but yeah, I don't know. So,
Maybe they didn't want to do like two bug poison types, like Beedrill and Butterfree weren't the same type, but Beedrill and Venomoth would have been the same type.
right. I wonder how many Pokemon that like, even if it's not by accident like that they design and they go, you know what, this looks way more like it should be, in this evolution line, and kind of gets switched in the design process. I would like to like be privy to that information, you know.
That'd be pretty cool.
Cool. So how about you? What name something that you think makes a good Pokemon design?
All right. Well, I feel like it's obvious at this point if you've watched the streams and watched any of our stuff, but long Pokemon are fantastic. I'm gonna start it right off with that. Long. If it's long, it's great. Alolan Exeggutor, great design. Galarian Weezing, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I love what they did with Galar Farfetch'd. He's got a long leak. He looks great. Surfetch'd, fantastic. There's a long ass spear. Trying to think of a couple other Pokemon. I know back in 3rd gen, I was a big fan of Tropius. He's a long boy. He's got the long neck. I wish they did something more with him, like give him an evolution or something. But I might think of another crazy long Pokemon in a second. But
did you get Galarian
yeah,
the Gigantamax Meowth?
Gmax Meowth, great design. But I was thinking about this earlier. Maybe another form that Pokemon can take that I'm a big fan of is like a baby Digimon type of form. I'll give you an example of this. Like I love Sunkern, like a little Digimon blob type of shape.
Right.
Sunkern. I love Spritzy's design. Big fan of Joltik's design. Like those type of things. I think they're great designs. Like it's a nice little basic design. They are what they are. Even Vanillux. I love Vanillux. He's like this basic little ice cream guy. And it also goes along with what you were saying before, where the Pokemon just gets bigger over time because it starts off as a little ice cream cone, like a double scoop, and then a big old sundae.
Yeah, that actually, I know that like people kind of like dump all over some of the Gen 5 designs, and you know the Vanillish line gets a lot of the hate, but I actually think in terms of just like concept from start to finish, that was a great Pokemon design.
For Gen 5, yeah.
Gen 5 has a lot of really solid Pokemon designs. That's a good place to pivot to something I want to talk about next in terms of designing Pokemon. So, one of the things about Gen 5 that people either like love or hate is that they kind of made it a soft reboot of the game. And
sense for sure.
Yeah, I remember at the time really thinking and I still think it was like a cool idea that there are like these different regional variants of Pokemon almost before we had the concept of like Alolan and Galarian Pokemon. So like, remember Swoobat instead of Zubat?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like in this other part of the world, there are similar animals that probably like share similar ancestry and evolved over time into like their current forms. That was really cool world building for me. I think
yeah.
I liked seeing it. I feel like they haven't really done it since with that kind of thing. But I'm a huge fan of the Alolan and Galarian forms. I feel like those are really cool variants of their original versions of themselves.
I think they definitely, like you were saying, they definitely could have maybe even started that trend in Gen 5.
Yeah.
With like all those Pokemon that were very similar to past generation Pokemon, like specifically like the soft reboot of Gen 1, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They could have done something like Unovian Love Disc with Alomomola, or Unovian Tauros with Bouffalant.
Yeah, it
I mean,
makes
I'm
sense.
glad they didn't. I'm glad they didn't because I love Bouffalant. That's my favorite Pokemon. But
Right.
yeah, they totally could have done something like that with a lot of those.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I feel like they've kind of had the idea for variants before, but I think that going forward, variants are probably here to stay. Like we go to the next generation and it'll be like Gen 90 and Galvantula or something, you know?
Or even with the next DLC, they could just add more Galarians.
Right.
Hopefully.
Here's something that really bothers me when people critique Pokemon designs, and I'm very proud of us for both not using this word. This is something that I hate when people critique like anything in media or art or whatever. Is the term lazy
Oh yeah.
or uncreative. Like what makes something lazy or uncreative? And I know people fight me tooth and nail on this whenever I like call them out on it, but like I don't think you can look at Garbodor and say that that's not a creative design, right? Just like intrinsically,
Absolutely not.
he's who thinks of that? He's just like a weird little garbage boy, just dripping with slime. I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, Garbodor is a fantastically designed Pokemon.
I think we could both agree on that for sure.
Yeah, I also think that they tend to do a really good job when they add on to a Pokemon's evolution design in post, for the most part. So think about like a Gen 1 Pokemon that got or any previous Gen Pokemon that got one of the Gen 4 evolutions, right?
Well, every even numbered generation, we got evolutions, and the trend continues today.
Ooh, that's a good point. Um, think about like when they add to. Let's talk about like the Electivire or
Oh no, I mean that's
oh my
still
god,
great.
what's his Electabuzz line? So Gen 2 we get pre-evolutions for those Pokemon first, right? So we get Elekid and Magby for those and even what's
Smoochum.
Smoochum, I don't know. Smoochum to Jinx doesn't
You know
seem
what?
quite
It
as
works.
strong. I always kind of thought of like them as like a trio of like weird humanoids, Jinx, Electabuzz,
Yeah, and then they
Magmar.
failed with the Jinx line because they didn't add anything.
I think because they like made Jinx almost like blackface. It was part of that whole thing. And then
Well,
they were
they
like,
they
you know what,
did
let's not
change her
touch this one
purple.
anymore. They did,
Yeah,
but I feel like still, it's like
it's
Kadabra
it's
and
a
the
touchy
Pokemon
subject
cards,
now.
or Porygon
Yeah.
in the anime. It's just something they don't tend to touch, you know?
Yep.
Um, has Jinx even been in a national dex since Gen 2? I'm trying to think. I'm sure she has.
I I honestly don't know.
Huh. Well, somebody's probably listening to this and like screaming at their speakers right now. So leave it in the comments if you know the answer to
Yeah,
this question, because
if you
we're
know
gonna
the
forget
answer.
to Google it. Anyway, adding those baby forms was great design, and then they did it again when they made them evolve. Like
They did it in Gen 3 and then Gen 4 with baby forms, but you're just talking about the evolutions.
yeah, I'm talking like specifically about like Electabuzz and Magmar right now.
Oh,
And then even
Boober.
when it seems like whenever they add baby Pokemon, the designs match perfectly. Like Munchlax into Snorlax was perfect.
Oh yeah, it was good. Bonsly, perfect.
Oh, Bonsly
Mime
was great.
Junior.
Potted plant into a regular tree. That was
Mime,
cool.
yeah. Mime Junior was great. Azurill was pretty good.
Um, yeah. Um, I
Uh,
think they also do a really good
Happini.
job. What's that?
Happini.
Happiny. Oh man, I forget about all the baby Pokemon all the time. Pichu, even Pichu was a great like.
What was baby baby Roselia? What's that one called? Voodoo. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget. That might be my number one most forgotten about. That and Igglybuff. I forget that Igglybuff exists.
Cleffa.
Cleffa. Cleffa's a good one. I mean, Cleffa in terms of just like simple design, going
It's just
into like
it's
simple,
just a tiny little
yeah.
chibi Clefairy.
I mean, Chibi, Clefairy and Clefable are like the simplest of simple in terms of Pokemon design, and they found a way to make it like just as simple while still looking unique,
Yeah.
which was nice. I think that another thing where they usually nail the head or hit the nail on the head is megas and G maxes, when they do these weird like alternate temporary form changes and evolutions that they do now.
They just get bigger and edgier.
Megas get edgier. Um, Gigantamaxes get I don't
Thick.
know, just thick. You're right. Thick and covered in weird clouds.
Yeah.
A couple of those I think don't work particularly well. I want to use the term not effective instead of like, or not very effective. That's
In
fitting, right?
terms of design or in terms of what?
In terms of design, I guess, just like aesthetically, instead of using the term like lazy or whatever that people
Yeah.
would.
Who are you talking about then?
I'm gonna get into some of the Gigantamaxes because there's a couple that I think are fantastic and great, and a couple that like I don't know if they like make that much sense. To me, they're not quite as effective. So like,
Okay.
I think Charizard's is great. Just turns into an even bigger Charizard. Pikachu's and Meowths are both great. I am not a huge fan of the Flapple and Appleton Gigantamax.
I can be down with that.
I'm not a big fan of the fact that like they're two different Pokemon, right? And I get
Yeah.
they're like related because they come from the same line.
Applin, yeah.
But like they evolve into something completely different, like different like stats and everything. And I get they're both still like apple based or whatever. But why do they both turn into like the weird? What even is Gmax Appleton? He's like
He looks like a Yoshi and an apple.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like imagine a big like almost like the Venusaur design that we have coming out in the DLC version of Appleton. And then like I don't know.
Like Flapple. He looks like if Flapple was sitting inside of an Appleton.
He does. And it's I don't know, to me it's not very effective.
I don't know. Yeah. I wish that they were different, but at the same time I can see why they chose to do that because they kind of just fused the two designs together.
Right.
It's a weird choice though.
I will say though, so kind of get into like closing thoughts here, and thank you again for listening to us just ramble about what's basically a conversation about what Pokemon we do and don't like. Well, I completely lost my train of thought just now because I remembered another thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, you know what? Just keep on going.
We've been talking about aesthetics, right? What makes
a
good Pokemon design like aesthetically? Well, one last thought about the aesthetics is I tend to like designs that they don't necessarily have to be like super simple, but I definitely prefer it if they're not overly complicated. I think a good benchmark is if like a moderately talented elementary schooler can doodle it and you can tell what it's supposed to be. It's a good Pokemon design. Like Arcanine. I feel like a talented 5th grader could draw a decent Arcanine. You know it's supposed to be an Arcanine. But if you ask that same 5th grader to draw something like I don't know, what's a really complex design? Like a I'm trying to think.
Eternatus.
Oh yeah, perfect. Okay. You ask a kid to draw Eternatus or the alternate version of Necrozma. Ultra Necrozma, right?
Oh geez. Or even just freaking Necrozma forms.
Yeah. Or like the black and white 2 cover art Pokemon. Like I think those designs are all fine and they're effective, but they're definitely not the ones that I prefer. I'm more of a fan of that like old school ish Ken Sugimori, like they're just basic colors with like squat forms that are easy to doodle. Primape's a great Pokemon design. I could draw Primeape and I can barely draw.
Well, I can't think of too many complicated Pokemon. Like I love a lot of complicated looking Pokemon, but I love more non-complicated, not non-complex designs. But I can think of a complex design that I do like. I really like Giratina, but he's got a lot to him.
Right. Yeah, something changed design-wise after Gen 2, and I don't know if it's I think part of it probably has to do with just different creative teams starting to take over, and different voices in the room when they're coming up with things. But I think it also has to do with maybe the fact that they were able to show more advanced art in the game itself, going from like the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance, that they could start to have like a Rayquaza, or like the kind of like detail that you see on like Groudon and Kyogre, compared to like what you would see in Hello and Lugia. I feel like those designs are a little bit more complicated in some ways.
Yeah, I feel like Gen 3 definitely started bringing out more of those complicated designs, because I remember I always used to love drawing Pokemon when I was a kid, and I'd draw like Gen 1, Gen 2 all the time. And then when Gen 3 came out, I feel like that's when a lot more they kind of added in some like if I say like Aztec kind of looking Pokemon, do you know what I mean? Where like there's a lot of jagged lines and
I know
and like
exactly what you mean.
pieces.
Like
Yeah,
it
because
kind of
it
started
like
to influence the art a little.
yeah, because there was ruins. They had the like the Reggies and stuff. I thought Rayquaza was a bit of a complicated Pokemon to draw at the time.
Oh yeah, he's definitely hard to get along.
Groudon had a lot of pieces to him. He's got like layers to him.
Yeah,
But
Kyogre's a little bit more simple than the other two for sure, but still.
yeah,
I don't know. I feel like Lugia is great like cover art Pokemon because anybody can draw Lugia. He's just a bird with like weird diamonds on top of his head for eyes.
I think up through Gen 2, the hardest like the most complicated design for a Pokemon was probably Ho-Oh. I think you might have just said that, but yeah.
Cool.
And then
oh, sorry.
no, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say that kind of like wraps up what we thought about like aesthetically what makes a good Pokemon design. I was gonna start to get into the concept sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I love like flavor in a Pokemon design.
Oh, I'm all about that flavor.
So
yeah.
designing a Pokemon isn't just making it look cool. It's not just making it fit in with its evolution line, but it's also like I love the amount of effort they put into even just these short little Pokedex blurbs that go into like building the world with the Pokemon, and you kind of learn how their designs work in that world. So a great example of this is the Pokedex entries for is it Seviper and
Oh, Zangoose?
Zangoose, yeah. Because in real life, like mongoose and snakes, they like hate each other, right?
Well, they hunt each other pretty much, I think.
And isn't that like mentioned in their Pokedex entries in one of the games?
I don't know if it says it might say something similar to that, but it's like whenever they come across each other, they always fight to the death or something like that.
Exactly. Like I think that goes into making a good design. And it's also like what moves does the Pokemon know, and does it make sense for this Pokemon to know this move? So obviously like any kind of like punching Pokemon, if it gets all the or like anything that bites, if it gets like the elemental punches and bite moves, I'm like, all right, that's cool, this makes sense. What doesn't make sense is when you have something like Wooper
Okay.
that can learn Ice Punch, but he doesn't have any arms. What are we doing? Why is Wooper learning Ice Punch but doesn't have any arms? Doesn't make any sense.
Honestly, there's a lot of weird like ways or Pokemon that learn moves that just don't make any sense, and that I think that just goes into like the classicness behind Pokemon, because Gen 1 it was all over the place. A lot of that stuff didn't make sense, and that just carried up through Gen 2. And then once it finally jumped into like the Game Boy Advance generation, they were kind of getting a little bit better with that stuff, because honestly, why is Gyarados learning Thunderbolt? I don't know. There's no reason he should learn Thunderbolt.
This is true. I hate when I'm playing a game and I like assume a Pokemon gets a certain move based on just like looking at it like, oh, this guy's gotta get this move, and then he doesn't have it.
Freaking Slowbro learning Fire Blast? Come on.
Come on, guys. What are you doing? I like it when a Pokemon is based on something in real life that like makes a lot of sense. Like Decidueye, people always were like, I remember when he first came out, people were like, this doesn't make any sense. Why does he become a ghost type owl? But he's based on like an extinct version of an owl that used to be native to Hawaii, which I always thought that was like top tier flavor.
Like like regional flavor type of stuff too,
Yup.
where Marowak's kind of like a spirit dancer or something along those lines, and he's in the Hawaiian region.
Yeah, stuff like that is awesome. If the region is based on a real life location, and the Pokemon seems like it's supposed to be in that real life location,
Ooh,
it makes sense to me.
Alolan Exeggutor.
Yeah, perfect example.
Like
Alolan Exeggutor.
yeah, the regional forms do a great job of representing the region that they're native to.
Yeah, like Alolan Weezing. Smog and Top Hats. They
Yeah,
wear those in Britain, right?
top hats, monocles. It's Britain right there.
I love it. I love it so much. Rotom, like that kind of thing, like forms that are based on something sort of in game. Like Rotom's a ghost that you like find in a TV, and then you find out he can take over other appliances.
That's so cool.
Um, I also love just Rotom as a design because there are so many other, like you see him like inhabiting the camera when you're playing online battles now, and he's in your phone, he's in your Pokedex in the last game.
He's cool. The PC in the Pokemon Center now.
That's right. For some reason, he like powers your bike somehow. It's cool that they were like, we just found this Pokemon, now let's harness let's enslave it and throw it in our toaster ovens and
let's abuse its unlimited energy.
Perfect. And it's a ghost too, which means that like we had to kill a bunch of other Pokemon to turn them into Rotoms, right? Is that a thing?
They're the ghost of Pikachu.
Oh man, so I think I could go on about this subject for hours and hours, but at the end of the day, what makes a good Pokemon design is just whatever you think makes a good Pokemon design. I think that's what we've discovered.
Yeah. For me, if it's long, if it's a long Pokemon, if it's a thick boy Pokemon, yeah, I don't know. That's it. They're cool to me. If they just get buff, like bigger and buffer as they evolve.
Yeah.
Fantastic designs.
For me, something that starts out really simple, like a Cyndaquil, into a Typhlosion that just kind of looks like a bigger, like adult version of itself. That's what I'm going with for like the strongest designs personally. In terms of aesthetics, and then in terms of like, you also got to consider like lore, moveset, when you're thinking of something that's like well designed. And then we didn't even get into like what makes a good Pokemon design competitively, because just by the nature of the game, like every once in a while you're just gonna get a Pokemon that is pretty much useless competitively just based on its typing.
Yeah, it tends to be the edgier Pokemon are typically the stronger Pokemon. Right. And then
the ones that they know are very marketable.
Well, I don't know. The ones that are like more rigid looking in design, I feel like they typically tend to be stronger.
Right.
And then the ones that are like big old blobs, it's hit or miss if they're gonna do well competitively. Like Clefable's a good example of a blob that just is good competitively.
They typically do a good job of like telling you, or of just like physically representing not only like I feel like for most Pokemon, not for all of them, but for most of them, you can look at the Pokemon and you could kind of tell what type it's going to be. Like purple Pokemon a lot of the time tend to be like poison type. Grass Pokemon a lot of the time
for the most part,
green, blue being water. And again, not always the case. Like look at Zacian, he's blue, he's not water, but he also doesn't look like a water type, But for the most part, you can look at a Pokemon, you can think not only what type it is, but like what's it going to do? Is this going to be a really bulky Pokemon? Is this guy super fast?
If it's bulky, typically they could be slow.
Right, or it's going to have like high defense one way or the other.
Yeah, high HP.
Right. It's definitely impressive. People, they crap all over certain Pokemon designs, whatever, but I feel like most people would agree that most Pokemon designs are pretty solid, and it's pretty impressive that we're on like what, 800 something, almost 900 Pokemon now.
Yeah, I find it impressive that I don't know if they designed the Pokemon first or if you almost wonder if they like some people in Game Freak just give the design team like stats and say design the Pokemon around these stats. These are the Pokemon.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to look through that information on like a case by case Pokemon. And we know through like, I mean, what kind of got me started on thinking about this subject recently was how we've been getting these leaks of Pokemon designs that were scrapped from beta versions of the Game Boy and Game Boy Color games.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, like all those scrapped Gen 2 designs, I thought were really interesting to see where they changed some things and how some Pokemon, it looks like they just scrapped the idea altogether and might have maybe revisited it for a later time.
Later generation.
Yeah. So, for instance, when the first round of like leaks from Gold, Silver, and or Gold and Silver came out uh, about a year or so ago, there was like a weird little like shark Pokemon with an anchor for a tail, and I was like, I could kind of see how they definitely just straight up abandoned that idea for that generation.
Yeah.
Um, but they sort of brought it back.
Now they have a shark and an anchor, and if you combine those two together, it would look just like that Pokemon.
Right. Exactly. But it's cool how they might have either like, I think it might be kind of a stretch to say that they just straight up took that design and turned it into Sharpedo, or what's the anchor called again? I don't even remember that Pokemon's name.
Delmise.
Delmise. I think it's a stretch to say that it just straight up became those two things, but they definitely were like, all right, it's time to make a shark Pokemon.
Sharpedo is missing a tail, so I don't know.
Well, that's true. They were like, you know what? This guy needs to be way faster. Cut that anger off of him. Oh my god, it makes perfect sense. Anyway, yeah, it would be interesting to see like what goes into like keeping a design or scrapping a design. I just want to tack on one more thing that I think is kind of cool about the Pokedex entries.
Okay.
I like when the entries get sort of updated over time. Like Lapras's original Pokedex designs said that they were like hunted to extinction, or that they were like a like severely endangered species.
Yeah.
But then you see stuff like how I think it's in the newest game. It says like this Pokemon was once endangered, but now they're thriving due to like humans interfering and helping them breed or whatever, I think. So
yeah,
it's cool to see stuff like that, how they like, people say that they're like lazy about story and stuff, but like to me that's not what I come to a Pokemon game for. The world building comes from like the creatures and how they interact with the world almost, and like that to me is more impressive than any kind of like story they're gonna come up with for the game.
I think the plot of the game, of the Pokemon game, is only a small piece of the entire game experience.
Right. I agree. For me, that's like, it's not really. I don't care about the plot.
It's nice to have a good story to play the game through to get to the end game that we strive for, but
yeah,
I'm waiting to be impressed like Gen 5 impressed me again. I have not been impressed since then.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, this could be a whole other video by itself, like what makes a good Pokemon story. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get into that with another one with like we could probably talk about with the greatest, our favorite generation of Pokemon.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that one.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting too to see like what goes into that conversation, because like the rabbit hole just gets deeper. It's Pokemon designs,
it does.
Starters, it's music, it's characters, it's story, all kinds of crazy things. So I think that just about does it for today. Like I said, I could ramble about what I think makes a good Pokemon design forever and ever, but this is by no means a definitive like list. We're not saying if you think Vanillish is a bad design, you're trash.
But I'm saying if you think Charizard is cool, you're trash.
Oh, so get out of here. Charizard is like was made in a laboratory to be a cool dragon that little boys would love. And you know what? It worked on me in 1998, and it hasn't stopped working on me. I love that edgy little chubby salamander dragon.
Can't please them all, but
Can't please them all. But you know what? I can tell you one thing's for sure. They're probably never going to stop shoving him down your throat.
and that's a discussion for another time.
It's true. We'll do a whole video on, like, is Charizard fatigue real?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is. Just specifically about Charizard. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for today. Again, you've been listening to the Pokelore podcast. Generally, we're a YouTube channel and live stream. We stream every Wednesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We take battles with viewers. We do raids with viewers. Sometimes we play Smash Brothers, but that's on a rare occasion.
Twitch and YouTube.
It's just a good time to hang out. We basically just have these same kind of conversations, but instead of watching me fail a raid 4 times in a row, you watch me lose to a bunch of people on Twitch using Zacians. So,
yep.
Until next time, I've been Nick.
I've been Ben.
And we will catch you on the other side. Okay, bye.
Peace.